Okay, the next speaker is Mleczko? No.
Yes.
Yeah, this one I got it right. Okay, and we'll talk about an alternative solution to OAuth in Python. No, it's not about. It will be about OAuth, really.
Yes, it will be about OAuth. Okay.
Okay, tell me about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. So my talk will be about Velruse. I don't know, is anybody familiar with this library? Is using it in production or just for fun? Anyone? Don't be shy. Okay, that's good. Because probably if you didn't use this library, you have also tried to use OAuth in your applications or projects. So probably you already know all the pain behind it. So I hope this talk will show you that you can get this pain on the reasonable level. So enjoy. Yes, you probably hear I'm Andrew. I'm from Retartle. We are an Italian-based company. We do mainly Python. Most of our projects are pyramid-based and clone-based. And this is exactly the best environment for Velruse. But as you will probably notice in a few minutes, you can also use it in any other environment. So this is not only for Python. Okay, so what is OAuth? Somebody knows what exactly is OAuth? I mean, not what everybody thinks it is, but just something like, I don't know, a Wikipedia quote or something. Yes? Not exactly. Okay, so maybe let's check the Wikipedia. This is an open standard for authorization, right? It's quite clear. So, what probably also, apart of the fact that it is an open standard, it also have a lot of, it gives you also a lot of bad experiences, right? So you can probably add much, much more to this list. But this talk is not about that, right? I don't want to make any arguments which version is better, if the version 1 is better or the second one is better, or we should have another one. This is not about that. As I told you, the talk is about Velruse. And Velruse is practically, this is a Python library with a set of routines that helps you to authenticate with the OAuth providers. So practically, all the shit that you need to do with the OAuth token dance and so on is done practically for most of the providers. It's already done. So what you need to actually do is just to connect to it, and it will give you back what you need. That's it. So I'm not the author of this library. Ben is, and here you have the links for the documentation. It is fully open source. It's on GitHub. So if you would like to, even right now, check it. It has very good documentation. So practically most of my slides, starting from now, will be based on that documentation. So I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So I will just explain you how we are using it in Retartle. There will be also some examples that are not covered by the documentation. But the documentation is practically very up-to-date and pretty cool. So what else Velruse is doing? Apart of the fact that it helps you with the OAuth, providing those routines, it also normalizes things, right? So you have pretty much a lot of providers right now. You have Facebook, Google, you have Twitter, you have GitHub, I don't know, LinkedIn, Microsoft Live or so, whatever. And all of those providers, they don't speak the same way, right? So what Velruse is also doing, it normalize the response. So what you will actually receive from Velruse will be normalized. So you will get the same credentials. I don't know, if you need only the email address and the profile name and those basic credential things, the response that Velruse will give you will be always the same. So you can ignore the fact that Facebook is slightly different than Google. So that's in our cases when you are handling multiple providers. This is a huge benefit because you just ignore it. The other thing that is also interesting in Velruse is that it is easily extendable. So it is, I will also show you some examples later. It is easy to write your own provider plugin. So if you have a very strange provider that is not covered by Velruse, it is not also very difficult to just write it and then reuse the whole mechanism, and that's it. So both cases are interesting here. Okay, so let's go more deeply into the Velruse itself. So you can use Velruse in two modes. You can use it as a standalone service, so it can run as a WSGI application, and then you communicate using the REST API. So you can practically use Velruse also with, I don't know, PHP application, whatever. You don't need to completely use Python if you want to use it like that. Or you can use it as a pyramid plugin. There are also examples in the documentation that will show you how to use it as a pyramid plugin. So you can just, if you have a pyramid application, you can just plug in Velruse in the standard way using the pyramid includes, and then automatically use all the routes that are in Velruse itself with your pyramid application. So those are those two methods. They work, I mean, the way they work is very similar. If you use it as a, maybe I'll show it here. If you use it as a standalone service, you will need to make 3 steps. So the first step is always calling a provider/login. So it will be, let's say, Google/login or Facebook/login. You will make this post request to Velruse. It will returns you the token, and then you will need to exchange this token back to Velruse for the full credentials. And this happens when you actually when you are using it as a standalone service. If you're using it as a pyramid plugin, practically the second step is done automatically inside. So you just make the request, the first one for the provider login, and Velruse will give you back the full credentials already. So that's practically, for the usage, this is the only difference. If it's the configuration itself, you can see this is the WSGI configuration file. Here's an example if you use it as a service, or if you use Velruse as a service. You need to specify the endpoint. So this will be the example.com/loggedin will be the endpoint of your third application. It could be in WordPress, right? And this endpoint will receive the token that you will later exchange for the credentials. And here is the standard way, the last lines are the standard way of providing the consumer key and consumer secret for your provider. Some of the providers also accept for which scope you are making the request, so you can also define it. And of course, you can define all of your providers here. So this is just an example for Facebook, but if you have multiple of them, you just put there here. And then, let's say this is in a Flask example. If you just want to get the token, and okay, this is a dummy thing, right? You just render the token in your template. So this will be actually this example.com/loggedin. This will be your Flask application listening to that route, and the token will be in your request parameter, right? If you want to do it more, if you want to make all those 3 steps, so you would like to exchange the token back to the full credentials, you will take it from the request, and then you will make another request to Velruse for the auth-in, and then you will pass the token actually, and it will respond to you with the full credentials, with the email, whatever it is, right? But this is only needed, this additional request thing is only needed when you are using the Velruse as a standalone service. If you use it as a pyramid plugin, the configuration is very similar. You don't need to provide the endpoint, of course, because the endpoint will be, you can of course customize everything, but if you just want to use it as out of the box, you don't need to specify endpoints because the routes for the endpoints will be directly in Velruse, so the pyramid will be aware of that. You just need to include it in a pyramid way, right? So pyramid includes, and then you specify which providers. And again, for each provider, consumer key, consumer secret, and that's it. And then the complete view is slightly different. It gives you more flexibility. I actually really like it because you can you can do it like that. So you can just define that this view is registered for the authentication complete. So if the authentication succeeds, this view will be called. And as you can see in your context, you have the provider type, provider name, the profile itself, and the credentials, right? But Velruse exposes much more. I mean, you don't need to just do it as the multiple contexts, right? You can just register also a view only for, I don't know, Facebook authentication complete, or for Facebook authentication deny. So you have this flexibility. It is already built in Velruse itself. Yeah. So, as I told you, there are multiple providers, right? Those are already built in. There are, I think, much more, around 12 or 13. Some of them, they don't even have any logo, so it was difficult to just put them on the slide. But those are the most popular. We have actually used, I think, a part of, I think, Yahoo and Windows Live. We have used also pretty much all of them. And they are really working. I mean, it is a pleasure, right? Because I don't know, somebody was struggling before the Google OAuth authentication, was playing with it, and it was painful, or it was because for us, practically, we have been using also the previous version of the API, so it was probably, I think, 4 years ago or something, or 4 years ago. And it was really painful. I mean, you spend a lot of time. I mean, the documentation was not up to date with the library version itself, and it was difficult to just to understand it. So when we switched back to Velruse, that was it, right? You just need to put those two things. I mean, the consumer key and secret, and automatically it was working. The good thing is, and this is what I probably forgot to say at the beginning, you don't need to just make a simple authentication, right? If you provide here or you register your application, in this case, the Google application, for multiple scopes, you can actually do the whole OAuth here, right? You don't need to just make another request back, because, I don't know, if you would like to make an application that requests the calendar API, right? You can just put here the scope for your calendar API, and automatically you get the token that will be valid also to communicate with the Google Calendar API, right? So it's really minimize the pain of all the OAuth work you need to do. Here I would like to show you another example. We just make something like we wanted to see as a proof of concept if it's possible or not, to make a plugin for Alfresco. Alfresco right now supports the OAuth authentication as well, and they have also a very minimal API to use it. And actually we did it. So this is, of course, the standard configuration part, and here you can see how actually you need to, what you actually need to do to register your own provider, right? So you need to just define the class, and then you have two methods, right? There's the login and the callback. Those are practically two things you need to implement. Here's just a short, I mean, this is not the full login. It is a little bit longer, but I have just extracted the most important part. So actually what this method is doing is redirecting you to the, in this case, to the provider endpoint, right? So this is what actually you need to do. Taking from the request, taking the scope, adding some additional parameters, and that's it. And redirecting you to the provider. The callback is what is actually called by the provider. So this is the endpoint of your application. And again, you are getting the state. This is what actually Alfresco is responding with. You get the client ID and the secret, and you exchange it back to, in this practically line, you exchange it back to a full token. So if you have other providers, you just need to register this one class, and that's it. And then you can use this one with your additional standard provider. So if you would like to have Alfresco with Twitter, Facebook, Google, that's it. So probably it reminds you a little bit of, there was RPX Now project. It is called right now, I think, differently Jan Rijn, I don't know how to pronounce it properly. So this is very similar, right, to that one. The only thing is that this is completely open source and it is pluggable and you have full control of what is happening. And you don't need to pay for that. I mean, for the other one, you just need to pay. Then you get nice widgets, but come on. And that's it. So I think it's quite simple. So another example I would like to show you, what we did recently. I think it's not yet released on PyPy, but at the end it is already on GitHub. There's a Plon plugin. There is a Plon Pass plugin. The Plon has a pluggable authentication system, so it is also reasonably easy to plug in your custom authentication. So, but actually what we wanted to do, we wanted to reuse Velruse as a standalone service. So just run it somewhere. And we wanted to allow users in Plon to authenticate with the OAuth providers that are actually in Velruse already. So we have wrote this plugin, and then you have these widgets like in Europython now, right? And then we have also implemented this custom provider Lepida. This is, I think, I don't know exactly what is the full specification. I think it's typically Italian thing or something, but anyway. Yeah, so here you have another example how easy it is to even if you have a non-pyramid application, how to plug in Velruse inside. It was not very difficult. We have spent a few days for that, and that's it. And then here you have the configuration in the Velruse standalone service for the Plon part. Here you have all the consumers one by one. Probably we miss here the Lepida, which didn't fit, and that's it. So if you're interested in how it is written, or you just probably we will release it in a few days, so you can also start to use it in Plon. And that's it. I think I have still 13 minutes left, so if you have any questions right now, I have left 10 minutes for, maybe I have to speak a little bit too fast, but if you have questions, I hope you will, because I found this library really useful for web development, so if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask me. Thank you.
Is it actually possible to, or how is it possible to test these interactions? Like if you use Velruse and you don't want to actually use the real services or so all the time, but just run your tests like during development, that everything integrates correctly. Is there some kind of support or so for that?
There is no actually, I mean, this is a very good question. There is no actually a support directly in Velruse, but it shouldn't be very difficult to use mock or something. Just, I mean, if you use it as a pyramid plugin, probably it will be much easier. If you will use it as a standalone service, it shouldn't be also, I mean, then practically you don't need to Velruse at all, right? You can just mock in your test cases. But there isn't any helper test cases or something like that, I'm afraid.
Hi, very good speech, thank you.
Thanks.
So in example, you specified the Twitter, for example, Twitter application ID and Twitter application secret just directly in the WSGI config file.
Yes.
But what if you have multiple Twitter application and you don't know which application you will use until this time? You only know this in runtime.
This is also possible because actually you have two ways. I don't know if you are familiar with pyramid conventions. There are multiple ways to make the configuration work. I mean, the ini file is one of the ways. The other one, you can just, in your application itself, when you build the configuration file, you can pass it there. And I didn't show that actually because I wanted to keep the code simple. But if you check the documentation, there are some also helper methods to register your providers, and you can do it runtime. There's no problem for that.
Hi, thanks for your talk. Are there also any things in Velruse for writing your own provider, or is it mainly about consuming OAuth?
The example I show you for the alfresco, for the one this was, I think, here. This one, for instance, this is practically, yeah, there is no actually any helper classes or something to build it because it's actually quite simple. You just need to provide your your class with two methods, the login and callback, and that's the end of your of the implementation of your custom provider. So I don't know if this actually answers your question.
But I assume this one is using something that's in alfresco, or not? Is it? This is it. This is just the full provider.
This is actually full provider, right?
Okay.
Because
I thought you were using something that's inside alfresco and.
No.
just
I'm not using.
interfacing.
No, I'm not using any alfresco libraries or anything, any sort of that. I mean, here you are making actually, you are making the pyramid HTTP found, which is the redirect to the URL. That is the alfresco URL, and then this is practically happening outside Velruse at that moment because we are redirecting to alfresco. Alfresco is taking right now the responsibility of the request and doing whatever alfresco is doing. And then you are also passing the callback, of course. And when alfresco finished the whole token thing and dance and so on, it will redirect you back to the callback. And that's why you have the other method. When alfresco finish and redirects you back to this one, here you implement the final part.
Okay.
So you have those two things and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
How do you handle the invalidation of the credentials after some time?
Validate the credentials? What do you mean by that exactly?
Refresh token. Refresh token.
The refresh token. Actually, there is, I mean, I didn't show one thing in Velruse that I think is also interesting, is that there is a credential store implemented in. So, for example, if you are using it as a standalone service, and you need to do this additional step to get the credentials back, passing the token only, you are actually not making any additional request to the provider. You are taking the credentials back from the store. But I honestly, no, I think at the end you will need to implement this part by yourself. It is not provided here. But honestly, I will need to check it. So I also ask you to check it by yourself also, because I'm not 100% sure what will happen in this case. Because the providers we have been using, sorry, yeah, I'm not sure. So I don't want to put you in the wrong path. So it's a good question how actually it is happening. Thanks.
Is there any support for calling methods on the remote API after a user is authenticated? So you look like you're using it just for login rather than to be able to, call Twitter methods after I've logged in with Twitter.
I don't know exactly if I understand your question, but probably what you want to do is you would like to do something additionally after the provider successfully answered with the token, or so
do something with Facebook or do something with Twitter.
Yeah, so for instance, you can do it here, right? You can register your view. I mean, if you use it as a standalone service, then it's up to your application. I don't know.
So where do I get the credentials to be able to make a request back to Facebook?
The credentials are in the context of your request. So if you get it, for example, context.credentials or here you will have all the tokens that you will need to get to pass through in the next request to Facebook.
So that doesn't go through Velruse?
No, Velruse is only, it initiates the first request, get the token back, stores it in the internal store, and then you can just reuse it back. So either like that or in the generic method and then whatever. So.
One thing, are you sure that the UUID .uuid4 is cryptographically safe? That you used on the, because probably I am not sure it is.
But what exactly is the question?
Yeah, the session.
Which slide?
I was wondering if.
This one? No.
No, there is a slide with an UUID. I was just wondering if Because I'm not cryptographically safe.
This one?
Yeah. Well, I will check.
But actually, I mean, probably this one is not needed anymore. I mean, as I told you, this one is just an extraction of the full method. So probably this line is even confusing because it is not used correctly. So yeah. Yeah, it is not used actually here. So anyway, if you want, I can check it exactly how it is on GitHub. So we'll see the full one. But we can also check it just after the presentation. Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe. No?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There will be the... there should be the coffee break in 5 minutes or something. Thank you.
It's a good question, actually.
I don't know, I will have to check the documentation.
I have the code here, so we can check exactly the OAuth implementation, how it is done.